Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Good Vibes Gaming discussion because E3 is canceled. E3 2023 specifically because they haven't said that it's shut down all completely, but it is canceled, and that's why we're just got together as quick as we could. No cameras or anything like that. We're going quick and dirty on this one because it is some breaking news that does. Well, let's put it this way. The news killed IGN. The website has shut down because of that breaking news, and that takes some doing. I will say that. But I am joined by Ash Paulson and Steve Bowling as we sort of give our thoughts on that cancellation and what this means for the future, because I have been able to glean a few things from that article. Basically, both the physical and digital E3 are called off. They're done. Any of the interested companies that were still sticking with it wouldn't have any playable demos ready. And then the ESA and ReedPop has said that they will continue to work together on future E3 events. And I will say this right now, I don't believe them.
Yeah. I think they intend to do that, but I don't think it's actually going to happen. It's hard to imagine E3 rebounding from this. I hope it does. I'm of mixed feelings on this, but this is a sad day for sure. Sad day for the industry and those of us who remember what the spectacle of E3 used to be like, and the chance to hang out with friends and meet colleagues from across the industry. It's a sad day for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, I agree with you. It's sad news that E3 got canceled. I don't think any of us expected this when we were at E3 2019, a staggering 4 years ago at this point.
No.
I mean, they didn't end off in the greatest of ways with all of us getting doxxed. So, there might have been some issues on the way out.
Yeah, the funny thing is, though, and I remember saying this after that event in 2019 where all our personal information was leaked, that I was like, oh, man, if they handed it to the people that do PAX, then everything would be great. The PAX folks are great at this, and they took over E3 2023, and we're finding out now how that's going.
Right.
There's something wrong with the ESA.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one part of this that I'm not upset about is, I was pretty pissed, just like you both were, that when we got doxxed and all of our personal info was leaked, like that pissed me off, the ESA. And back then I was being indignant, being like, well, maybe E3 should just ride off into the sunset. Screw the ESA. I won't miss it. But I've definitely, softened my stance on that. And I still hate that we were doxxed, but I am sad about E3 as a presence apparently dying. Maybe it's just this year, but I kind of have a feeling that this may be it. This may be the final nail in the coffin. Unless somehow they're able to rebound and get the big three on board at the very least. But I don't know if I see that happening.
Yeah, I think about this, and I see a lot of people blaming E3's inability to adapt to the current landscape, and I don't really think that was it. Because 2019 proved to be a very unpopular year for E3 outside of, our personal information getting leaked and that of everyone in the media.
Right.
It was a really unpopular year for a number of different reasons, chief among them being, and you remember this, Sony has been out of E3 since before all this. And it seemed to be, although we never got public confirmation, it seemed to be tied to the fact that they started doing non-industry stuff at E3, which is historically an industry event. And as soon as they announced that they were going to start doing fan tickets to E3, Sony pulled out.
Right.
And so I think that may have been the beginning of the end, so to speak. I think the bigger issue here is that E3 essentially took the last 3 years, not counting this one, they took them off and they tried to do a half-baked digital event. But I think the issue is more, once E3 was forcibly removed as a avenue for publishers to get their news out, those publishers started to realize that they could still get that news out the door and save literally millions of dollars on E3 costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
It's one of those things where it just was a domino effect of, do we need this? Do we need to spend on this? And, the whole reason the publishers did all this was to get it to the industry, to get it to show off the game to news media, to show off to other developers, maybe get them interested, maybe get a publisher interested if they're indie. But when you introduce the concept of normal, non-media making it in there and truly clogging up the place, and it was already busy before, then that's another aspect of, well, is it worth it? Maybe it's just worth it to get the media to come to us for certain events in order to show things off. Like there was just a Tekken 8 event where they brought in people to play Tekken for the first time and get impressions out there. And that's, that's all over the place right now. Do they need E3? And the consensus seems to be no, that E3 just found a way to, like, it was already floundering. And then the steps they always took to try to help it continue to make it flounder. And the thing is, Jeff Keighley's here to come to Summer Games Fest and we have all this. I'm sorry, that's not a replacement. It's just more of like,
it's not the same.
Yeah, this it's not a in-person event, and it's just, to me, Summer Games Fest has always been just slapping a logo on top of an event that was already going to happen.
Mr. Keighley has been absolutely savage in the way he's treated this, because every time news broke that another developer, another publisher was pulling out of E3, he would tweet right after it, like about Summer Game Fest. And even today, Derek, you were talking about before we started, not 20 minutes after this news came out, he already posted yet again about Summer Game Fest. And I'm like, this man, he's going scorched earth. He has chosen violence. And I can see it. He's all about that hustle, as you were saying to me, Steve, earlier, and I agree. But it's also just a little bit petty, and by that I mean a lot of bit petty. But hey, I guess you do what you got to do. I think the sad part about this, one of the sadder parts about this, is Derek. You're so right about the biggest developers out there: your Nintendos, your Sonys, your Microsoft, Square, Capcom. It's been proven year and year again that they don't need E3. But who does need E3? Are those middleware developers, are those indie developers who relied on E3 to network and to make connections and to get their games in front of people. And that's who I feel this hurts the most, and I just think that's a damn shame.
Sorry to jump in here, but is that necessary anymore? I go back to the fact that, the business in general had to change over these last few years because we weren't doing in-person events. And I mean, in a weird way, is E3 a delayed casualty of the pandemic, right? Because people had to learn how to make these opportunities for themselves without the great meeting place that was E3. And I'll be honest, my current take is that it's not coming back. It's done. I don't
that's
think
sort
that
of what
E3...
I feel like. This was supposed to be their big comeback after the last time, and to have it happen again with everybody pulling out before this was announced is, not a good look. And as something you mentioned on Twitter, Steve, I noticed that they did it. They announced this so late. People have tickets. People bought tickets and spent money and got things reserved so they can go to this. And now it's gone.
Yeah,
and they're not going to.
I have a ticket.
Yeah, they're not going to offer refunds.
So I got an email from ReedPop once we started recording about E3.
Okay.
So they sent me an email. Just says, "Hi, Steve. Thank you for applying to attend E3 2023. We are writing to let you know that E3 2023 will not be taking place as scheduled. The ESA and ReedPop recognize you may have made plans around the event. Thank you for your support and apologize for the inconvenience. Please keep an eye on e3expo.com for any further updates to E3. They don't say anything about like, hey, we're sorry you might have booked a flight, paid for a hotel. Like that is
Jesus.
Because some of these things are like non-refundable,
Yeah.
Fortunately, I didn't do those things. Like I was kind of nervous about whether this was going to happen or not. So I didn't go through the labor of paying for travel yet.
Good thing.
But I guarantee you people did. And probably a not insignificant number of people did.
I feel so bad for those people because I admit I have long taken that for granted because I live 15 minutes away from the LA Convention Center. So I had not gotten around to registering yet. Not that it matters now, but I feel so bad for those people for whom they don't just live right in LA and had to book those flights and book those hotels. And I hope more people than not saw the writing on the wall like we did, Steve, and kind of held off on booking. But I know, as you just said, there are definitely people out there who just got really screwed.
Right. And the thing that I find really interesting about this is it gives me pause for, even if they do try to move forward with an E3 2024, do I even want to apply?
Yeah.
Because again, what if they just pull the rug out from under me, again, this late in the process? I would have to see something from somebody outside the ESA showing strong support for the show for me to really think that there's a future for it. Like, at this point, I don't care what the ESA says. I don't care what ReedPop says. I need to see like Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft saying, yeah, we're going to E3 and we're in full force. And I need to see it, like, not in an IGN report, not that I don't have faith in them, but I need to see it directly from the horse's mouth. I need to see Nintendo publicly say that they're going, for me to really feel like, okay, this show's really going to happen. But I feel like the thing that the big three aren't saying is that they just don't need E3 anymore. They're being nice about it. They're not just saying like, hey, we figured out we don't need this and it's not worth the money for us.
Yeah, I mean, they can cut out all the noise by appealing directly to their existing audiences with Nintendo Direct, States of Play, the occasional Xbox Bethesda developer showcase. I mean, they haven't needed E3 for a while, and it's just kind of like a sad but open secret that it's kind of true. I mean, I'm going to miss the spectacle, though, that's for sure. I'm going to miss we all know Nintendo had crazy booths every year during E3's height. Remember that Breath of the Wild booth, the Smash Brothers Ultimate booth? I mean, Sony had these, they all three of them did. And I'm going to miss the spectacle, but I definitely get why it's not needed and why, publishers don't feel like they need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on having massive booth presences.
Dude, yeah. I think you're being very
hundreds of thousands. Yeah, you're right. It's probably hundreds of thousands. Yeah, you're right.
I remember one of the years I went, there was a recreation of the house from Resident Evil 7.
I was there, and that was such a good one. I love that one.
It's cool, no doubt, but the amount of money they're spending in order to stand out and get people to check out their demos. There was a recreation of the reactor in Final Fantasy VII for the remake when that demo was happening. Yep. They had this whole unique presentation, had to pay extra money to Jesse's voice actor for that presentation.
All three of us were there together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They had the battle bus from Fortnite on the show floor. Like, an actual bus was just in there.
Yeah. And they had Cloud's Hardy Daytona there. They always had some nice ass car in the Xbox booth to show off the latest Forza game. Like, there was so much bombast that it's just not the same at other shows. Certainly not SGF, but even PAX. Like, I love PAX, but it's not quite the same vibe there. And so, I'm going to miss that singular feel, that singular experience that E3 was. And, to be selfish a little bit, I know all of us were so excited to finally get the whole team together for E3 and cover a show, all of us together for the first time. And that we're gonna have to do a PAX at some point all together, because I don't think E3 is gonna be it anymore.
And I will say that's the one thing that I feel is missing from the gaming landscape now with E3. None of the existing shows really serve as like a universally agreed upon gathering point. E3 was kind of a focal point for the industry at large for many, many years. And that was kind of known as like if you're anybody in the games industry, that's the show you make time for. That's the one you definitely go to, and the PAXs and the TGSs and the EGXs, all of those are ones you go if it's convenient for you. But E3 was like the must attend event of the year. And I'm curious if any of these existing shows will kind of slide into that place, and it will really, to me, be dictated by where the big three go and where they choose to compete, if they choose to compete.
And I think that's a key thing as well, because as you were saying, it's the place to go. The industry sort of focused on that because it's also the biggest money-making time of the year. It's where you got your ad revenue, because people are constantly looking at, during E3 week, checking out the news, and it's a big opportunity for a lot of places to earn most of their revenue for the year, or at least a good chunk. And what impetus does Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft have to show their things all at the same time anymore? You just get lost in the crowd.
They don't need to crowd. Yeah, you don't need to crowd each other out anymore.
Yeah, it's like always like who won E3? Who did this? Who was the big thing that got all the attention? Why would they compete like that? Just find a way to each show off what they want, like they've been doing with Nintendo Direct, and spread it out. And now there's no one big focal point where all the news happens, and that will affect media covering games.
I wonder how this
Absolutely.
affects the context surrounding Gamescom going forward, because that's essentially Europe's version of E3, and that's a massive show in its own right. Not E3 massive, but massive. And I wonder if eyes will now kind of fall on Gamescom to try and fill that void at all. I don't think TGS is big enough to do it. I think it would have to be Gamescom.
See, so the thing I find interesting about that is I would probably make a strong argument that most of the games media landscape, well, I shouldn't say most, but a significant portion of it is English-speaking media.
Definitely,
Whether that's covering Europe or the U.S. But I would say that we probably here in the U.S. have a much larger games journalism community than any other part of the world. I would argue the U.S. just has more folks that work in the industry than any other country. And so I think it makes sense to have a U.S. based show, because then, the majority of people, when you introduce international travel into the equation, and I totally get that our European friends and our Japanese friends and everybody else has been doing that for E3 for a long time, but I think it was probably arguably because there was a much larger contingent of people that cover games here in the States.
Right.
But I think you significantly reduce the chance of attendance when the cost gets way too high. Like, if you talk about E3, the highest cost is getting John over here. If we all have to cover Gamescom, suddenly we've got 5 of us flying to Germany. And that is crazy expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But going kind of back, like, I think that maybe E3 is maybe the death knell for shows in general. And I hate to say that because I love them. But I think the media-focused show might be something of a relic of a bygone era at this point. You have to remember that E3 was founded in a pre-internet era. So this was back when you could not see these games on Zoom, on Teams. There was no YouTube. This was back when games journalism consisted of getting cartridges in the mail.
Right. Yeah. And a lot, like seeing the pictures from magazines and stuff. That's how I first heard about E3 and saw this amazing event full of games that just, I think it captured the imaginations of a lot of people our age, seeing what that was actually like and, dreaming about being able to go, which is why it being made public made sense from a certain aspect, because there's a lot of people who just never would have been able to go to something like that. But then there's, again, it diluted the point of E3 by having those extra go. And I don't want to besmirch it too much, because I met Amy by going to that E3. Right. So, worked out for me pretty well. And I know those people, a lot of people had those very memorable experiences, but that aspect is not needed anymore. You were talking about no video, like it was a big deal when G4 went to E3 and you could actually see the show, see it all actually have video and in person and see what this spectacle was actually like. And then E3 had to kind of clean up its act, or at least the people had to clean up their act, because there was a lot of booth babes before that point, and they sort of shuffled them to the side.
Well, and even before, the pandemic and E3 kind of steadily declining, you started to see PAX take on this role of being a fan-focused E3 for people who either couldn't get into or couldn't afford to go to E3. PAX kind of took on this role of being a mini E3 where fans could play a few months later everything that we played early at E3. And that's only become more and more true as the years pass. And at least that's been true in my case, having gone to E3 both on the media side and then as a content creator or media attendee at PAX, where the public can go. I often saw them playing updated builds of games that we had gotten to play at E3 just a few months prior. Again, not that one is a replacement for the other. PAX doesn't wholesale replace E3 because it is not a media focused show. In the way that E3 was. But Steve, I agree with you. I don't know that there is a role for a entirely media-focused show like E3 to play in the modern age. I just don't know where it really fits in anymore.
Right. I find that really disappointing. Speaking as strictly as a media person, because E3 did have, kind of like I said, it was a focal point for the entirety of the industry, right? And you would get opportunities at E3 that you would not otherwise get.
Yeah.
PAX, like you said, is kind of a great E3 light.
Yeah.
But E3 itself, let's be real. Nintendo, I remember Nintendo famously once told me, like, hey, Steve, you're never going to sit down with Shigeru Miyamoto. You're just not big enough. And I was like, fair. They're like, if you get a job at like Time Magazine, call us. But,
Right.
and I appreciated the honesty, but I met Miyamoto at E3. Like, I got to speak to him, maybe not in an official interview, but I got to literally like shake the man's hand and take a picture with him. I got to meet Eiji Aonuma. I actually got to sit down and talk with Reggie Fils-Aimé because I just happened upon him in public and he was okay with us, having a quick chat. And those are things that I don't think any other show really can provide, right?
Right.
The opportunity to maybe have a happenstance encounter with, frankly, like legendary figures within the gaming community. And I understand that when you boil it down to dollars and cents and actual value, it's totally not worth it. It just isn't.
Yeah.
Nintendo's not going to go like, oh man, a lifelong fan is going to meet Miyamoto in a hallway and that's worth us flying him across the world for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel that it does in some ways limit the industry. It limits the industry in terms of those happenstance encounters can very well lead to business dealings. I've told this story before, but I think it merits in the context of this discussion. Starlink came about because Miyamoto happened upon a prototype of the game at E3. Like Ubisoft, he had seen it at the Ubisoft booth and he wanted to see it closer, so he requested a meeting with them. And, Miyamoto, Bill Trinan, and Reggie just walked on over to the booth. They got a really good demo of the game and they were like, hey, we'd love to put Star Fox in this. And that's how we got that.
Right.
So, there are some real tangible things that that because these companies are in person and able to kind of drop the competitive veil and see what they're working on. And it can lead to stuff that won't happen otherwise, right? Because these companies aren't in the habit of like letting each other know what they're doing.
Right.
So, that to me is kind of going to be the biggest casualty of E3. The fact that games possibly like, Crypt of the Necrodancers, Legend of Zelda stuff, that those are probably going to be harder deals to broker than they were in the past.
The other thing I've seen this already mentioned is with E3 gone, let's just send the demos that were there directly to the people. That's never going to happen.
Nope, never going to happen.
Because as soon as you send it out to the public, that is some hacking waiting to happen.
Oh yeah,
and you have to you have to scrub it clean, make sure there's nothing in there that can reveal other things. And it takes effort to make a demo and have it ready to go for the for that kind of consumption to check it out. That's extra time away from development. And that's another thing that's not worth it, and certainly not worth it to have your entire game cracked open and reveal everything within as soon as you send it to people. So yeah, these type of demos are probably not a thing of the past, but definitely way less often. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, the big thing about E3 being the way it was, and to be fair, like you said, Derek, these demos aren't going to go away, but they are very different in how they're presented. It's worth mentioning that, at least in terms of big publishers, they're still doing in-person events. They're just doing them on a much more intimate scale. Like Jedi Survivor had an event. Ash, you talked about another event that occurred just a couple days ago, right?
Oh, that was Derek mentioning the Tekken 8 event, which,
Right. Derek mentioned Tekken 8. Yeah, Keeley posted about playing Tekken 8 recently.
Yeah.
So there's, they're still doing these. And for what it's worth, Nintendo still does these events. We have people go to them on occasion for us. But the key is that they control the demo. They control the presentation of it and the hardware that it's running on so that, like you said, Derek, people don't crack these open and find out a bunch of stuff and they lose track of the narrative, because there's no way they're going to start polishing demos up to be, completely sanitized of all the other stuff. Because then, like you said, that's extra time in development. That's time taken away from making the actual game. And I know that I've heard over the years of being at E3 and in the industry, the developers don't really love making these demos in the first place. Like, they don't love that rush to get a vertical slice out the door for E3.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, got to work on this now in order to get this. And yeah, it helps because it can help because it all of a sudden gets eyes on your product, but it's a tricky thing. Like, there's a lot of things working against E3, and it's just all come to a head because even before all this was happening, E3 was struggling for an identity and really trying to find a way to stay relevant. And all of its attempts just seem to hurt it more, or just put it on life support. And it's finally happened, and it's sad in a lot of ways because of the pedigree, the memories, the mythos surrounding it from when we were kids. Just seeing it in the magazines, but it's also like it makes sense to a degree because of the way things change, and it's just not a thing as much anymore. It's just not as important, and it's sad. It sucks for a lot of reasons, but yeah, we'll just have to see what actually comes of it. But I think we're all in agreement that this is probably it. I can't see it coming back.
Yeah. I don't see it coming back. I think that they may have one last like struggle year left in them. But it's really going to be telling when console manufacturers are ready for their next generation of hardware, how they're going to position announcements of those, because they've been doing it outside of E3 for a long time now. But usually E3 is where you get your first hands-on with these devices, or they take the cover off of them somewhat. Like Microsoft and Sony love doing that. But yeah, it used to be a rite of passage, right? When I started games journalism, my initial thing to tell myself that I made it and that I was serious about this was getting an invitation to E3.
Same.
So it'll be interesting to see how that goalpost moves for people.
Yeah, I mean, it really it felt like such an incredible pedigree back then. You felt like a big deal, capital B, capital D, if you got to go to E3. Like, that was, as you said, Steve, that was kind of a sense that you had made it, that you were legitimate in covering the game industry. And I have so many unforgettable memories with E3, and even though things do change, and it's not surprising that this happened, and you kind of touched on this too, Steve. Even if E3 does have one more struggle year left in them, it's not going to be anywhere close to the same as the memories we have of pre-pandemic E3, and especially significantly pre-pandemic E3, and. So from a personal standpoint, it's just it's bittersweet. I'm just thinking back all to all the memories I have with all of you, with all of us, and prior to that, I mean, Derek, I met you at E3, and that's how I got in with you, in the old channel. And that's how that led to all this.
Yeah, that's how those connections can help.
Yeah.
I happened to listen to the episode of your dad's podcast where you were on, realized that you were like how into games you were, and then I saw your name. Was like, there's no way. It's like, so, and I remember seeing the sigh on your face where it's like, I'm sorry to ask this. Are you, Rob Paulson's son, Ash? Is your dad Rob Paulson? I was like, yes. That was sort of your exact reaction. I'm like, I heard you on the podcast, you being in the games, and I immediately took it to games because I know how annoying it is to interviewed to talk about your famous dad, or like, tell me about your dad. It's like, no, let's talk games because we're waiting for this thing and let's do it.
And that was a Pokemon X and Y developer roundtable, right?
Yes, it was a Pokemon.
That's amazing.
That where I was taking notes for the old channel, and I remember you getting big laughs because you had a question when it was time to ask questions, and you said, "Hi, I'm Ash," because everybody was giving their names, and everybody like laughed at that because, well, Ash.
Oh yeah. And I think, knowing me, I'm pretty sure I asked about the soundtrack. Of course I did, because I'm me. But I'm pretty sure that's what I asked, and. I mean, I'll because we're all olds here, and I will never forget my first E3 was the one where Squaresoft was demoing Final Fantasy VIII, and this was back when they had
Oh my God.
their own theater. They SquareSoft used to have their own mini theaters built into their booth, and that's where I first saw my first ever glimpse of Kingdom Hearts, the original Kingdom Hearts, and I that was my very first E3, and I still remember waiting in line playing FF8 demo kiosks while waiting to get into that theater. It's just bittersweet.
That's so funny because my first E3 was when Kingdom Hearts 3 was, that little teaser was shown. And I'm sure you remember me freaking out.
Oh yeah, we were both there. And that was one of the better E3s, certainly one of the better PlayStation conferences. Mm-hmm. That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, E3 is at its best, it's a really magical event. Like you get to see some of the best parts of the games industry and some of the coolest things that never really occurred anywhere else. I remember specifically at the last E3 we were all at, Sega was promoting the Genesis Mini, and they had like an enormous Genesis controller that needed multiple people to operate, and you could play Sonic on it. Sony was always known for their E3 parties. Their media events at E3 were always crazy over the top.
Yep.
It was just it's unfortunate to me that we won't get that kind of stuff, but I understand that the industry has moved on from it, but it's still kind of a loss for me. The thing that I think bums me out the most about losing E3 is that I have a ton of Nintendo Life badges, I have a few GX badges, and I have 0 GVG badges for E3.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's the part that makes me kind of sad, is that we all started this new thing, and I think we all kind of were looking forward to coming together at E3 as a team and doing what we do best in person together. And we never got to do that. And I feel like E3 was the place that I really wanted that to happen.
As the joke around me goes, I never got out of the dungeon.
That's right. Derek never got released. And that was when we founded this channel. That was one of the things we said we were going to make sure didn't happen.
Yeah.
That was like our tagline for the first few months. Like, when we go to E3, no. Derek will not be locked up.
Yeah. Well, y'all best believe I'm going to be harassing you liberally for all of us to do a PAX together someday, because all of our fans, every time I do a fan meetup, even just with PAX East a few days ago, they're all like, man, it's so great getting to meet you, Ash, but man, how cool would it be if the whole crew could come? And I think it wouldn't be the same as E3, no, but I sure hope we can make that happen someday. And
as we keep growing, I think it'll happen.
Yeah, no, I think it will eventually. But you touched on something, Steve, and you're right. We're never going to have any GVG badges for E3 most likely. And Brandon mentioned something right before we started recording that really resonated with me, which is this was going to be his first and maybe only chance to go to and cover an E3. And there is a whole generation of players, content creators, journalists that will never get to experience what E3 used to be. And I find that a little sad.
Yeah. It's worth noting, too, that Brandon has the relationship he has with GVG because I met him at a fan meetup at E3.
Oh, right. That's true. I forgot about that.
I had him. He drew a little picture for me, and I asked him if he could give me his information, and we swapped contact info. And I remained in contact with him for years since. And when GVG started, he was one of the first people that I wanted to bring into the fold because he made such a great impression on me at E3.
Right. I completely forgot that happened at E3. Yeah, and I remember that meetup too.
So crazy. But, well, I think that pretty much covers it. It covers it. It's end of an era, as we've been saying. So I think that covers it for our end of E3 2023 discussion.
God.
That's depressing.
E3 is dead. Long live video games.
Yeah.
Of course, we'll be there for whatever comes in place. We'll see what Jeff has in store for Summer Games Fest, whether it's more than just sticking his brand on top of whatever is actually going on, and seeing what happens. But thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming. But subscribing to the channel, ringing that bell helps us out a ton as well. Let's keep those numbers going. And hey, maybe we'll all be able to do that meetup at PAX like Ash wants. Who knows?
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
But until that next time, you all take care. Bye.